Hello, everyone. It's only 10 days until the presidential elections. It's unbelievable. And we've just had the final debate last night. That debate was a test for both candidates, but for two very different reasons. For Joe Biden, it was something of a final hurdle. He managed to get through an entire campaign without falling prey to his significant cognitive issues, aided by long spells in the basement, granted. But this was to be his last big stumbling block. For Donald Trump, the debate was an opportunity to win over swing voters and show a more statesmanly side to him, something voters were looking for following the first debate. Today, we're going to be analysing the results of the debate and examining whether the candidates managed to achieve their objectives. This is Political. My name is Connor Allen, and I'm joined, as ever, by the wise and intelligent Ian Smith.
True words. Hello, everyone.
And before we begin, please do subscribe to us if you haven't done so already. It really helps the channel. It really helps us get the message out. Leave us a like if you like the content, and leave a comment. Tell us what you think. If you agree, if you disagree with us, whatever. Everyone's welcome. And more importantly, please do share the video if you do like it. Perhaps you have a friend who's a bit of a politics nerd as well. Maybe they'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
So onwards with the.
Sure. So the every time you have one of these debates, there'll be that kind of like focus group who a group of supposed undecided voters or whatever, and that gives us kind of an inclination as to which candidate actually did anything. I think very rarely do you ever really see any kind of swing after a debate in the polls anyway. But having said that, this was still an opportunity for Trump and Biden to win over undecided voters. So the LA Times did a Zoom focus group of 15 undecided voters. And it seems that essentially they mostly, if they were to break anywhere, were swaying towards Trump. So some of the words, they were asked to give words to describe how you felt about the candidate's performance. And for Biden, they said vague, very vague, non-specific, cognitively impaired, old, uncomfortable, elusive, grandfatherly, and defensive. And for Trump, they were a lot more positive: controlled, composed, constrained, reserved, poised, con artist, surprisingly presidential, calmer, and restrained. And then when they were quoted, given to give some more detail about what they felt about the performance, he said, "We've been waiting to see this man act presidential for 3 years, and he hasn't. And we get a glimpse of it, and it gives us hope." The woman said, despite her unhappiness with Trump's behavior, she trusts him to handle the economy. I honestly felt in this debate Donald Trump did much more presidential, or seemed much more presidential. Tonight he showed restraint in comparison to the first debate, and Joe Biden can't give a straight answer. He was so elusive. Trump's presidential behavior meant something to me. Another woman said, "This is one of the reasons I have such reservations about pulling the lever for Donald Trump. He has been embarrassing. I haven't been embarrassed by his policies, but embarrassed by what comes out of his mouth. I just think that character has been the biggest thing that has held me back for voting for Donald Trump. Tonight he showed me that he can behave in a way that is more presidential, and that will affect my decision going forward." So for me, there seems to be a kind of common theme here, a common sentiment, and something that I thought about really kind of leading up to, well, throughout the whole election really. But when it comes to where does Trump need to win support, it's not really so much as, I feel like he's already won a lot of support of people that had voted Democrats in other areas. Like we've seen his Hispanic vote and black vote and things like this. He's polling really good for them and he's improved, but he still needs to bring back those voters that did vote for him 4 years ago. And I think it's mostly women, like suburban women, that have these reservations about voting for him because of his personality, but not because of his policy. So, I mean, is that how, do you see it that way as well? Or?
Yes and no. I mean, there's no escaping the fact that he's a polarizing candidate, right? I think the main thing is, if people have already made their minds up on Trump, on his character, okay? If you're not, is there really any swing voters left? If you're not going to vote for Trump because you can't stand the man, then you're already not voting for him, right? You're already voting for Joe Biden. I think these people want to do is they really want to vote for Trump, right? I think it's, as you say, they're a bit scared of saying it. They don't want to appear, they don't want to say they're voting for Trump, and this shows up in the polls too with the secret conservative effect. They don't want to be seen to be voting for such a, for lack of a better word, crass man, as they would see it. But I think it's really interesting the Joe Biden responses here, because we were saying last night, weren't we, when we did our initial reaction, the longer that Joe Biden speaks, the worse he looks. And this is the only moment of the campaign where he has actually been held up to any significant scrutiny. You know, he doesn't have moderators asking him preordained questions that he knows in advance. It's the only time that that he has been forced to react, and he's fluffed it.
Yeah, so particularly the one example that comes to mind from the debate was when he was questioning, why didn't you do anything in the 47 years that you've been in government? And to which his response was to kind of comic book-esque, not comic book-esque, but it's probably not the right term, but that kind of silence afterwards, that comedic silence afterwards, after he says, the Republican Congress, and everyone's like, well, what? And you hear the moderator.
I didn't know that the Republicans were in Congress for 47 years.
Yeah.
So I think that's another Sleepy Joe fact, isn't it?
Yeah. And it seems, and we were talking about this before, it seems like with Biden, everything in his 47 years, everything was either a mistake or he couldn't do it, but he wants to do it now. And I just don't really think... I saw a clip of a guy, I can't remember who it was. He's an athlete, he's a sports athlete. I think he's Hispanic, I can't remember. And he was talking about, he said, for me, I can only put this to you in sports terms. Donald Trump has been our coach for 4 years and he's been winning Super Bowls. You don't sack the coach that's been winning Super Bowls, and you certainly don't sack him to bring in a guy that's been coaching for 47 years and hasn't won anything. And I think that really hits the nail on the head in regards to the point, the theme, the feeling that Trump was trying to get across with that, and he did so. And it's no surprise to me that people, describe Joe Biden in this way, like, defensive and vague and, well, obviously cognitively impaired, because every time he was given a chance to speak, he just kind of talked himself into a bit of a hole, and it just kind of... He didn't really get across, I thought, any sort of very... specific kind of well thought out points.
No, and I mean the gaffe in saying he's going to ban the oil industry, that's going to haunt him for the next 4 years if he wins, isn't it? But I think as well, one of the major points was that Biden comes across as a very typical politician, and that's reflected in these voters' answers, because they seem to suggest a degree of mistrust with Joe Biden, and they want him to be specific because they don't trust him to deliver on his word. And President Trump called that out last night. He called Joe Biden a typical politician, and it just kind of shows, doesn't it? Because Joe Biden, even in that debate, he lied about tracking. He said, "Go and put the video up." President Trump promptly put it up about 10 minutes after the debate. He's flip-flopped on every issue known to man, and the voters wanted to pin him down and get him to give them a straight answer, but he won't. I mean, he spent half a century in American politics. Of course, he can't do that. He's physically incapable of doing that.
Certainly, and if he couldn't do it as a young man with all of his cognitive ability, then he certainly isn't in a position to do it now. But I think as well, so let's just talk about what this means now, moving into the kind of final, as you say, like the final week, essentially, of the election. When we're talking about undecideds, for me, I really feel like most of the undecideds that are left now are people who have voted Republican, voted for Trump before, looking for reasons to get over his personality. Do you think now that there will be some kind of, like, I don't know if you want to call it a bump, because there's not really that many undecideds anyway, but do you think that there's the kind of momentum is with Trump now after this, and that a lot of those undecideds are really, maybe he's going to start just slowly bringing them home from this.
I think so. I think if you go into this debate with doubts over who you're going to vote for, you come out voting for President Trump, don't you? Because I mean, President Trump's merits and his achievements, they speak for themselves. The economy is booming. Most Americans, the majority of Americans, say they are better off now than they were 4 years ago. That's President Trump.
Yeah.
I don't. Sorry, go
Go
on.
on. No, you go.
But no, I actually lost my point. So you go.
Yeah, so I guess I just wanted to say I hear a lot of people. I think a lot of people misunderstand Trump voters. I think they think that they're voting for Trump in spite of his policies for his character, when I think actually it's the other way around. They're voting for his policies in spite of his character. And don't get me wrong, like people like that anti-establishment, persona that he has, and it's like, I'm not a politician, I've not taken, and he made that point as well to Biden about taking loads and loads of money from billionaires, like Bloomberg putting 100 million into Florida or whatever it was, and they have all their special interests and super PACs and this kind of thing. But he's right. I think that's the side of his personality they like. The anti-establishment candidate. What they don't like is that, obviously, as you put it, crass. I don't know how you another word to put it, but maybe that's suitable. Like that side to him, where he has his Twitter outbursts, and he said in the debate, I think at one point he was talking about people coming across the border that come back in the catch and release of the low IQ ones or something like that. And it's like people, like it is off-putting for a lot of people, I think, to hear that kind of stuff, but who do agree with him on policy. So I think he has reined in now that sentiment, and he's kind of caught onto it, and he's like, listen, going into the next week now, just need to make sure he gets all of that support that he had before, so that he's going in on election day with all of those kind of, with like basically as close to 100% support as he possibly can get from Republicans. I think if he does that, then he probably will win the election.
I'm tempted to agree with you too, because, and it's as you were saying, people often forget just how good President Trump's policies are. It gets overshadowed by the character, exactly as you just said. But I mean, if you're a business person, you have more money in your pocket. If you're a family, you have more money in your pocket. You're more likely to have a job. The pandemic notwithstanding, but people accept that that's an exceptional circumstance. President Trump has objectively improved the lives of a majority of Americans, and that shows through. I mean, it's the old idiom, isn't it? It's the economy, stupid. And he is clearly the best candidate for the economy. Now, the hard left and the mainstream media, they like to spin this narrative. Oh, voters really care about, systemic racism in America. They really care about immigration policy. And those poor children in the cages that Joe Biden built, whatever. They don't. At the end of the day, you vote based on your current circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. I think, having said that, I think most people are against racism. They just don't believe it's obviously systemic racism. So when you say they don't care, obviously, I know what you mean, but obviously just to clarify for anyone listening, obviously the majority of Americans still care about racism and injustice. They just don't see it as systemic. They see it as maybe more of like a, individualistic type thing, and you call out people who have racist tendencies, who have racist characters, and you call those people out. But to try and, rip down the whole system is not something that I think most people support, I guess, is what you're trying to say, which definitely, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Everyone agrees.
Thanks for covering for my
yeah,
moment.
I didn't want. Someone will still clip that 4 years from now and take it out of context. But anyway, listen. So I think just to then bring it all back together, it'd be interesting to see now what happens if there is any sort of little minimal shift in the polls. I think what we'll do as well is we're probably going to be looking at, has there been any kind of change in the number of undecideds now after all of these debates? And which I think there is often, that after debates, that is when most people go, right, I'm going to have to make a decision now. So I think we may potentially see now in these polls, we're going to see less undecideds in that section, and they're going to break one way or the other. I guess we're going to find out if they're going to break for Trump, if they're going to break for Biden, but there's just so little of them anyway. It's kind of hard to judge it, but that's something we'll be looking for, and probably something we'll do a video in the future. So if you haven't subscribed, there's a reason to, and if you do enjoy the content, then please consider subbing as well. And as always, thanks for watching.